Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the Russian oil and gas industry, and specifically the fact that Ukraine has now ramped up its efforts to target Russia's infrastructure to try to reduce the amount of income that Russia is earning to have an influence on the war. The war in Ukraine has now been going on for over 23 months and is approaching its second anniversary. And in situations like this, you can get into a stalemate. The war can just drag on. And as I've talked about before, in a previous campaign in Chechnya, Russia actually went on for 9 years before there was a resolution to that conflict. So in an attempt to try to bring something to a conclusion, Ukraine seems to have changed its focus over the last few weeks and is now targeting Russian infrastructure. In the most recent attack, which has actually resulted in the temporary closure of the Russian facility, the drone was reported to have flown over 800 miles before it hit its target. So we're talking very long distances here. We'll then have a quick update as to what's happening with the income that Russia's earning from its oil and gas exports. And then finally today, I'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think is likely to happen over the course of the next 3 to 6 months if there is a ramping up in drone attacks by Ukraine, and what the implications of that would be for the Russian economy. But before we get started on all of that, once again, I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody that sent me kind messages recently. Really appreciate that. And also, if you've bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much. Your support really does help me to keep the channel going. The largest and most recent Ukrainian drone attack on Russian oil and gas facilities took place on the 21st of January and targeted Novatek's liquefied natural gas facilities near St Petersburg.
A fire broke out at a Baltic Sea terminal in Russia following a suspected Ukrainian drone attack. Novatek, Russia's largest liquefied natural gas producer, said on Sunday it had suspended some operations there, blaming external influence. The Ust-Luga complex is on the Gulf of Finland, about 110 miles west of St Petersburg. The Interfax Ukraine news agency, citing unnamed sources, said the fire was the result of a special operation carried out by Ukraine's security services. Russian news outlet SHOT said local residents heard a drone operating nearby, followed by several explosions. Alexander Drozdenko, the Leningrad region's governor, said on the Telegram messaging app there were no casualties and all workers were safely evacuated.
As a direct result of the attack, Novatek has now announced that it has suspended a variety of activities at the plant. In a press release, the company said the technological process at Novatek Ust-Luga has been stopped and an operational headquarters has been established to eliminate the consequences. Damage assessment will be carried out later. The giant Ust-Luga complex is located around 110 miles west of St Petersburg and is used to ship oil and gas products to international markets. It processes stable gas condensate, a type of light oil, into light and heavy naphtha, kerosene and diesel, which are all shipped by sea. Now, one of the most interesting things about this drone strike is the distance that the drone would have had to travel across. It's estimated that from the launch area in Ukraine, it would have had to travel more than 800 miles. And although in the summer of 2023, Ukraine announced that it had developed drones that could travel 1,000 kilometers, so around 700 miles, this latest drone strike, if it was launched from Ukraine, would be the furthest that Ukraine has successfully deployed such a mission. And this really could be a potential game changer, because this would mean that Ukraine could now potentially start targeting lots of different oil and gas facilities all over Russia. And this now becomes a perfect example of guerrilla warfare, because the Russian authorities won't know where Ukraine is trying to target its strikes, and therefore will be less ready to be able to thwart any of those potential attacks. Another recent Ukrainian drone attack took place on January the 19th in the town of Klinsky in the Russian region of Bryansk. And you can see from this map that Klinsky is much closer to the Ukrainian border and really puts into perspective just how far away the St Petersburg attack that we just looked at is. This footage shows 4 oil tanks at a large storage facility in the town of Klinsky, which caught fire on Friday the 19th of January after it was reported that the Russian military brought down a Ukrainian drone. Alexander Bogomaz, the regional governor of Bryansk, posted a message on Telegram saying an aeroplane-style drone was brought down by the Defence Ministry using radio electronic means. When the aerial target was destroyed, its munitions were dropped on the territory of the Klinsky oil depot. Russia's official news agency, TASS, said the fire at the oil depot covered an area of around 1,000 square miles. And TASS also reported at the time that another Ukrainian drone, which had targeted the Russian Baltic Sea oil terminal near St Petersburg, had also been shot down. On January the 9th, it was reported that several Ukrainian drones struck facilities at a fuel and energy complex in Russia's Oryol region. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone allegedly hit the Orineft product oil depot, and another drone struck the building of a local energy provider. In addition to this attack, it was also reported that on January the 8th, explosions were reported at an oil depot on the outskirts of the Russian city of Nizhny Tagil, and a fire erupted at a substation in Moscow on January the 4th, causing electricity and heating outages in dozens of multi-storey buildings. One of the reasons why Ukraine is now able to target long-range attacks on Russian oil and gas facilities is the development of what's known as first-person view drones, or FPV drones. Now, when we use the phrase first person, often that's used in terms of gaming. First-person fighter games are where you look at the screen and you can see your gun at the bottom and you can go around shooting lots of people. But this technology is also now being used in real warfare, not just computer gaming. And first-person view drones basically puts you in the cockpit of that drone. The pilot of the drone puts on goggles, which enables them to see exactly where the drone is going, and usually these drones are controlled using a joystick type operation. So again, very similar to what happens in gaming. Now, when you think about a drone, you may think about one of those things that you've seen flying annoyingly over your garden that looks a little bit like a helicopter. It has a number of different propellers and it can fly in lots of different directions. And those drones are used in military warfare. However, those sort of drones tend to have limited range because they're battery operated. And the drones that fly over much longer distances that are being used in these long range attacks look much more like aircraft. Now, initially when drones were used for military purposes, they were used predominantly for surveillance. You can fly a drone at a very high height and then zoom in on all of the terrain so you can see where soldiers are hiding and located and what's going on the battlefield. But obviously the next level of development was to arm these drones, put some sort of weapons on them. And predominantly these days there are two different types of drone strikes. Drones can either be used to launch explosives, so they can drop bombs, or they can be the kamikaze version. And the term kamikaze is a Japanese phrase that means divine wind, and actually was coined in World War II when fighter pilots were given the task of actually flying their plane in a suicide mission directly into strike targets. And these kamikaze drones do exactly the same job. They are designed to be loaded with explosives, and the drone is flown directly into the target that the pilot is looking to hit. And the reason that these kamikaze drones could become a really important piece of the Ukraine war is that they can now be flown over very long distances, potentially up to 1,000 miles. And in terms of Russia being able to defend against these drones, they can be quite difficult because you can send lots and they can fly at very high altitudes and be difficult to pick up. So clearly drone strikes represent a major threat to Russia's oil and gas exports and therefore its revenue streams. So let's have a look at exactly what the current situation is with regards to Russia's exports. This chart shows the daily value of Russia's fossil fuel exports from the 1st of January 2022 up until the 14th of January 2024. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is shown in millions of euros. So taking a step back and looking at the overall trend here, you can see that in January 2022, Russia was earning around 900 million euros per day, which is around $820 million. So on an annualized basis at that time, Russia was earning around $300 billion per year from its fossil fuel sales. Interestingly, the immediate impact of its invasion of Ukraine was to increase the revenue that it was earning, predominantly as a result of the fact that gas and oil prices spiked in the months following the invasion. However, as you can see, over the last 2 years, the total income that Russia is earning per day has fallen. And Russia is currently earning around $550 million per day. So on an annualised basis, around $200 billion. So compared with its pre-war income, Russia is now earning around $100 billion less per year. So in terms of trying to quantify the impact of the sanctions that have been applied against Russia, that gives you a broad feel. Now obviously the attacks that we're talking about in today's video haven't had anything like that sort of impact. But I think the takeaway from today's video is that if Ukraine now has the ability to launch attacks all over Russia through these long-range drone missiles, that potentially could have a devastating impact on the total amount of revenue that Russia is earning, because if it needs to keep closing down its facilities and repairing everything that's there, that will have a major impact on its ability to keep that oil and gas flowing. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the latest developments in terms of Ukraine targeting Russian oil and gas facilities, and not just facilities that are on the border, but ones that are located quite a considerable distance from Ukraine at the ports, could have a major bearing not just on Russia's income, but also on the potential outcome of this war. As it sits at the moment, we are almost 2 years into this conflict, and right now it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. President Putin isn't known for giving up on things. Once he starts something, he generally sees it through to the end. And as I mentioned right at the start of this video, the conflict that Russia embarked upon in Chechnya lasted for 9 years. So there is no way that this is going to finish anytime soon because President Putin decides that he doesn't want to carry on. So there needs to be some sort of other impetus to encourage Russia to get around the table and agree some sort of negotiation. And the main reason I think that Russia would be encouraged to do something like that is financial. Up until this point, Russia has managed to get by selling lots of oil and gas to India and China. It's avoiding the sanctions to a certain extent because it's able to find those markets. But if Russia finds that its facilities start to be impacted by explosions and strikes, obviously that could cause major issues. Now we've talked about the technological and production issues that Russia is potentially facing. As a result of the sanctions, the majority of the oil majors walked away from Russia. And the reason that that's important is that many of those companies actually built those facilities for Russia. Following the breakup of the Soviet Union at the start of the 1990s, Russia invited in companies like Chevron, ExxonMobil, BP and Shell and asked them to help develop their facilities. And a lot of these facilities are located in areas with extreme climates. They are very cold in the winter. So you need to know what you're doing. You need to have good technology to be able to counter all of the problems that occur in those regions. Now, as a direct result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all of those companies have now departed, and they've taken all of their experts with them, and they've also restricted the future use of any technology. So if Russia is hit with a variety of explosions and strikes, there is no guarantee that Russia has either the capability or the technology to be able to get these facilities started again. So the potential impact of these strikes by Ukrainian drones could be really damaging. It's not just trying to fix exactly what's happened as part of that explosion. It may have a knock-on impact to the whole production chain and cause Russia serious problems. And as we've talked about before, Russia doesn't have anywhere to store its oil. It's producing around 9 million barrels of oil per day, and it's exporting around 5 million of those. So if its facilities at the coast start to be damaged, if tankers can't actually dock, if the production facilities can't keep flowing, then that potentially means that Russia would have to stem the flow of oil at some of its facilities. And if it does that, it could cause major knock-on implications, because there's no guarantee that if you stop the flow, you'll ever be able to get it running as efficiently ever again. So although in today's video we're only talking about 4 or 5 drone strikes that have happened over the last few weeks, what we are seeing is a rising trend. The Ukrainian authorities seem to have changed their approach, and they're now targeting Russian infrastructure because they know that that's the lifeblood of the war in Ukraine. If Russia lost all of its income overnight, it would struggle to keep the war going for more than 6 or 12 months. And the continued development of long-range kamikaze drones is now giving Ukraine the ability to target oil and gas facilities all over Russia. And what that means from Russia's point of view is that it's becoming more and more difficult to be able to defend all of its facilities because you don't know where the next drone is going to strike. So the overall summary of today's video is that over the course of the last 2 years, Russia has already seen a significant fall in the value of its exports. We saw that in the data we looked at. Previously, Russia was earning around $300 billion per year. Today, it's closer to $200 billion. That is a serious chunk of change. However, if Ukraine can successfully target all of these oil and gas facilities and cause more of these facilities to break down and have to be closed down, that in itself will obviously reduce Russia's income. But if the combined impact of all of these multiple strikes is that it has a knock-on implication to the whole of Russia's production facilities, then that could be catastrophic from Russia's point of view and could be the catalyst that is needed to try to bring Russia around the table and negotiate some sort of settlement to bring this war to an end. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.